Hi everyone, and welcome back to my kitchen. The next page in our taco manual takes us to a little known taco that is super famous in Puebla and parts of Mexico City, but not much beyond there. It is called Tacos Árabes or Arabic tacos. Now, the one thing that you have to understand is that there were a couple of major waves of immigration from the Middle East, mostly from Lebanon and Iraq, to Mexico at different times, but one big immigration came after World War I, and a lot of those people settled in Puebla, and of course they started making themselves at home and offering their food for the people in Puebla, and one of the things that they of course do is shawarma. So they started making these things and serving them sliced off just like a shawarma, but putting them in a sort of thin pita with a little strained yogurt sauce and a little bit of the salsa from the spot, which was the chipotle salsa. And they made these really good taco-like things, and they really caught on. Now, this is way before tacos al pastor, which are famous all over Mexico. And the tacos árabes really just stayed at home there in Puebla. So I'm going to show you how to make them because they have a very distinct flavor. One of the things that I'm going to start with here is simply sauteing some onions because we're going to need those when we get finished with the cooking of the meat in this dish. So I'm just going to scoop these guys into this skillet that I have heated over about a medium heat here. And we'll let those cook while I'm talking about the meat. Now, people say that mostly this would have been in the Middle East, a dish made from lamb, okay? And I looked and did lots of research, talked to people. No sign that this dish was ever made from lamb, even though probably it may have started off that way. But the meat of Puebla, of course, is pork. And so now everybody makes it, or maybe they did from the very beginning, with pork. I took this piece of boneless pork shoulder roast, and put it in the freezer for 45 minutes or so. That usually will firm it up to make the slicing of it easy, because I want to slice this into pieces that, or slices that are about 1/4 of an inch. This last piece, of course, is really hard to slice thin like that. So I just lay it down and try to cut crosswise through it here. But they're going to be the raggedest looking pieces that you have. We got a whole bunch of really beautiful ones over here. But I do want to keep everything at about the same thickness here. So that will be like that. Okay, I think that it's got a little bit of thickness to it on this one side, so I could take that off. Okay, noticing that these onions are done now. They've got a nice little bit of color on them, so I'm going to turn those off, and then we'll come back to that in just a second. So let's talk about spices now for tacos árabes. Of course, everybody knows that the tacos al pastor made in the same way, but with a red chili marinade, often that has a little achiote in it. These go a very different direction, and there's no acid in this at all. It's all about the spices. And in the Middle East, we have use of cinnamon in savory dishes a fair amount. So I've got cinnamon here. We've got cumin, which obviously is very important in Middle Eastern cooking, black pepper, and cilantro seeds, or coriander seeds. Now, there's a lot of it here. I want to be able to use a fair amount of it. So I could do that in my mortar, but it would take me a really long time. If you've got an electric spice grinder, that's what I would suggest. Or maybe some of you are just working with already ground spices and you just measure them out. But I'm going to use the high-speed blender because honestly it is very efficient for grinding spices like this. So put them in there. It has to be completely dry for this to work. And then we're just going to turn this on. it does an incredible job, and it does it really, really fast. And the smell is just so great. But you will find that there's a lot of it that will stick up on the top part of the blender jar, the lid for the blender jar. So I'm just going to scrape it into this small bowl here and then knock it like that and put it. But man, the smell of that it's unique. It doesn't smell like Mexican food. It smells like the flavors of the Middle East. So we'll put that back on there. And then I'm going to add the salt to it. And I'm going to add, this is a salty marinade here. So I'm going to put the 2 tablespoons of salt in here as well. Okay, got that. And then just mix it all together. And the next step will be to nicely season all of this meat with our spice mixture. A little tip about seasoning with dry spices or even salt and pepper: always do it from high up because it allows it to spread evenly over whatever it is that you are seasoning. If you put it down too low, it will just clump in places. Now, just for the sake of getting all this beautiful aromatic mixture into the flavor of the meat, you cover this and let it sit for half an hour or so, just for that flavor to start to get into the meat, or cover it up and put it in the refrigerator overnight. It'll be just fine if you want to be working ahead. Okay, I am oiling one side of these marinated thin slices of pork. A lot of times in Mexico they would use pork leg, which is something that really doesn't show up in the U.S. much as a cut that you can find to use. So I'm using the pork shoulder roast. I've got a hot grill here, and I'm going to lay these pieces in the hottest part of that grill. And I don't know how many I can get on here, if I can get the whole lot of them on or not, because I really want them to get a nice sear on them. But I think I can get them all on here now. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now the next thing, of course, is to oil the other side so that when we flip them, they won't stick to the grill. I really like using an oil sprayer like this. Okay, everything is looking nicely grill marked on one side there. And I can tell you that the smell of it is very, very enticing. All those spices and then the smell of the grill. Beautiful stuff. I'm going to let them cook for another few minutes. Of course, this is not making that trompo, that big shawarma-like spit at all, but it's going to give us a lot of the same flavors because who can do the full spit at their house? Now we're ready to go back in and finish these tacos árabes. Okay, now I'm slicing thin slices of this grilled meat here. I grilled it to about medium, and now I am putting the slices, the thin little slices, in with that onion that I sauteed earlier. Just mixing it all in there. I got one more piece of this. I like the pieces to be kind of short because that makes them easy to put into little tacos and to eat in tacos. So I'm cutting them about 1/4 of an inch or so across. And now we got to taste it and see where we are seasoning wise. Yes, there was salt in the marinade, but this is probably going to need a little bit more salt. And this is a place to talk about the finishing salts. If you have purchased any finishing salts, this is where you want to use them because they have a different kind of texture. When we're working with kosher salt or with fine ground sea salt, that is designed to just immediately be absorbed, to just disperse into the thing. This kind of, I'm using Malden salt here, which is my favorite of the finishing salts. When you sprinkle that over, it's designed to stay kind of crystalline. So I'm going to put a little bit of that over there and stir it in. And we're just reheating the meat and the onions all together here. And once we get kind of a nice flavor on it, then we'll build some tacos, okay? Though I said originally these were served, and still to this day in Puebla, you can find these served with a kind of thin pita, not the big bready pitas that you might be familiar with. But a lot of places just use flour tortillas for this. So that's what I've got here today. Is I'm going to make a couple of little tacos here. I'm going to take a little bit of the hot meat and onion mixture. I just like the onions in there. A lot of the places that I visited in Puebla will layer in their trompos, in their vertical spits, they will layer onions at every level. So they get kind of caramelized as they come in the contact with the fire. So that's why I wanted a little bit of that in there. Now, the next ingredient that we're going to use here is one that you probably don't know about because very few people in the US really know about it, and that is jocoque. So jocoque is sort of someplace between the flavor of yogurt, like strained yogurt, and buttermilk or sour cream, but more on that buttermilk-like flavor. So if you live near a Mexican grocery store, feel free to get that. If you don't, then what I like to use is the strained yogurt, like Greek yogurt, and just thin it until it's easily spoonable with milk. I just mixed in a little bit of milk there for that. I will show you a dollop here of that on top of that one. And then I'm going to show you the jocoque on the other side so you can see the texture of that. Since I can't give you a flavor of it, it's going to look a whole lot like that strained yogurt there. Now, the next thing that you put on to the tacos árabes always in Puebla is a chipotle salsa. So smoky and spicy and a little bit sweet. Okay, last garnish on here, classic onions and cilantro to go over the top. You have a classic taco árabe.